You just got your reviews back. 3 pages of comments. Your hands are a little cold. You scroll past the first paragraph of polite academic throat clearing and land on the verdict. Reject. You did everything right. Clean method. Careful stats. A result that replicates what the field already suspected, and still reject. You read the reviewer comments again, looking for the flaw. There isn't one. Not really. So what happened? Here is the part nobody tells you in graduate school. Your paper was never just being judged on whether it was true. It was being judged on whether it was interesting, and those are not the same thing at all. Think about the last 5 papers you actually remember from your field, not the ones you cited because you had to, the ones that stuck with you. Chances are none of them confirmed something everyone already believed. They surprised you. They flipped a coin and it landed on its edge. That is not an accident of memory. That is the entire selection mechanism of academic publishing quietly at work. In 2005, a physician named John Ioannidis published a paper with a title that stops you mid-scroll: Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. His argument wasn't that scientists were lying, it was stranger than that. Journals are drawn to results that are novel, dramatic, and statistically significant. And novel, dramatic, statistically significant findings are mathematically more likely to be flukes. The very features that get a paper published are in aggregate correlated with that paper being wrong. Sit with that for a second. The filter that decides what counts as good science is partly selecting for noise. You were taught that peer review exists to protect the truth. That's the story on the tin. But in practice, peer review is closer to an editor and 2 overworked reviewers making a bet. A bet about what will get cited, what will get talked about, what will make the journal look sharp. Nobody writes that down. It isn't in the author guidelines, but it is in the pattern if you know how to look. Here's a sharper example. In 2015, psychologist Brian Nosek led a reproducibility project. His team tried to redo 100 published psychology studies exactly as they were originally run. Fewer than half produced the same result the second time. Not because the original scientists were sloppy. Many were meticulous. It was because the publishing system had quietly rewarded the flashiest version of a result out of every version that was tried. Run an experiment enough times with enough flexibility in how you measure the outcome, and eventually something will look significant purely by chance. That something gets submitted, that something gets published. The 18 boring, faithful replications that came before it never make it to a journal at all. They're never even written up. This is the file drawer problem, and it has a strange kind of quiet violence to it. Not the violence of a rejection letter, the violence of 1,000 true, careful, unremarkable findings sitting in file drawers, unpublished and uncounted, while one dramatic outlier gets the cover. So, why does this happen? Why would a system built by well-meaning people end up structurally biased towards surprise over solidity? Because journals are not just archives, they are status ladders, and status ladders obey their own gravity. In 1968, the sociologist Robert Merton described the Matthew effect in science, named for the biblical line about rich getting richer. Famous scientists get outsized credit for collaborative work, while junior collaborators fade into the footnotes. The same paper submitted under a famous name is taken more seriously than the identical paper from an unknown. Reviewers are human. They lean on surface cues, a big name, a dramatic effect size, a tidy story, when the true signal is expensive to extract. None of these cues is the truth. All of them shape what gets through the gate. Which brings us back to your rejected paper. Was your science wrong? Maybe. Reviewers do catch real flaws, and it's worth reading their comments honestly before you blame the system. But it's also entirely possible your paper was correct, careful, and rejected anyway because it told a quiet story in a field that has been trained gate by gate to reward loud ones. Here is the part that should change how you feel about this, not just how you understand it. Once you know the selection mechanism, you can work with it instead of being crushed by it. You don't need to fabricate drama that isn't there. You need to notice where the real surprise in your data already lives and lead with that instead of burying it in paragraph 4. You need to frame your careful, unglamorous replication not as we confirmed what was already known, but as we tested whether a widely cited effect actually holds up. That framing tells reviewers this paper is a check on the system, not a footnote to it. The unwritten rule isn't asking you to lie. It's asking you to understand that a true finding, badly framed, and a true finding, well framed, are read by two different sets of eyes, even though the data underneath is identical. There's also a longer game here, and it's a hopeful one. The reproducibility project didn't just expose a problem, it started to change incentives. Journals like Psychological Science began offering registered reports where researchers submit their method and hypotheses before running the study. The paper gets accepted or rejected based on the quality of the design, not on whether the result turned out to be exciting. Under that system, a boring, well run study that finds nothing gets published exactly as reliably as a dramatic one. Ioannidis has spent the years since his famous paper working directly on these fixes: pre registration, open data, larger sample sizes, all aimed at closing the gap between what gets published and what is actually true. The unwritten rule is being rewritten slowly by researchers who got tired of watching good science lose to good storytelling. None of that helps you tonight, staring at a rejection letter that still stings. But it might change what you do with it. You can revise the frame without inventing the data. You can lead with the part of your result that a reviewer skimming fast on a Tuesday between two meetings would actually stop and reread. You can choose journals that have started rewarding rigor over spectacle because more of them exist now than existed 5 years ago. And you can stop asking every single time you get rejected whether your science was good enough. Sometimes it was. Sometimes the gate itself was built to let through a different shape of paper than yours. You didn't get rejected because you're not a good scientist. You got rejected because the system was quietly built to prefer the surprising over the solid, the loud over the careful, the famous name over the unknown one. That system is slowly, imperfectly changing. Yours can be one of the papers that helps change it further. If you learn to speak its unwritten language instead of only obeying its written rules. You just got your reviews back. 3 pages of comments. Your hands are a little cold. But this time, you read past the verdict and you start looking for the story your data was already trying to tell.